For more on the alleged media bias and the effect that it could have on the 2020 election is Amber Athey, the Washington editor for The Spectator. So, Amber, this situation has developed a couple weeks now. We first heard about the Tara Reade allegations actually all the way back in March, I believe, and they've developed a little bit more, and we've seen the media's reaction. So, acknowledging that, what do you make of the way that the media has handled this situation?
It's really wild to see the stark difference between how the media treats accusations against Republicans or people who are allied with the conservative side versus Democrats, because, as you mentioned, this allegation was first brought forward in late March, and it took the New York Times 19 days to cover Tara Reade's claim. Now, let's compare that to how they covered claims from Kavanaugh's accusers. The day that Julie Swetnick claimed that Kavanaugh was attending multiple gang rape parties while in high school, which was a fantastical, absurd claim, was covered on the exact same day by the New York Times. NBC News gave Julie Swetnick an interview on their television network and have not yet interviewed Tara Reade. So there's an obvious stark hypocrisy in how these two events have been covered, and you have to wonder if it's because the media is attempting to cover for Joe Biden.
And I think at that point, that's all we can really take out of this. I mean, I understand the difficulty of covering a situation like this. I don't feel right derailing a man's entire career because of allegations made 30 years ago. But as soon as other corroborating evidence starts surfacing, that's when you do have to take those allegations more seriously and start vetting them properly. And a lot of conservatives saying that's not the same type of reward that was granted to Justice Brett Kavanaugh during his hearings as well. So when we bring all this together, is it the media hypocrisy right now that is really being highlighted more so than this is a condemnation of Joe Biden just yet?
Yes, what I've heard from conservatives is that if Democrats are going to have this standard where you believe all women reflexively when they make an accusation, then that standard should be applied to Joe Biden. And you mentioned the corroborating evidence. Tara Reade has now had 7 people come forward and say that she told them about this incident around the time that it happened or shortly after the time that it happened. Meanwhile, when you look at Christine Blasey Ford, all of the witnesses that she identified said they didn't remember any such party that she attended with Brett Kavanaugh. So judging by the Democrats' past standards where they called for Kavanaugh to step aside because of that allegation, then Joe Biden should be asked to step aside. I'm right there with you that a man should not be destroyed over merely an allegation. But when we're looking at the standard that's been used in the past, either we're going by that standard or we're not.
Right. And this was something that they really instilled with the Al Franken thing. They said that because there's allegations against him, they forced him to step down. And a lot of people were even skeptical of that decision because at the time, Senator Franken had a very high approval rating among his constituency. A lot of people saying maybe the plan of action is to let the voters decide come the election instead of making this kind of blanket type of standard when it comes to all allegations. And now that's something that is seeming to coming back to bite them because now they have Joe Biden and they're not handling the situation in the very same way. But I think over the past couple days, there's been something that stood out to me, too. For example, President Trump had an interview with ABC's David Muir. And immediately after that, I noticed CNN and some other more leftist networks were very much so critical of David Muir for not pushing back, not for holding President Trump accountable, as they'd say. But then a lot of people on the right saying that CNN is just looking for partisanship in that way because that's not necessarily David Muir's job. When it comes to that interview, what has that response told you?
Well, CNN's response was particularly interesting because not only did they say they wanted David Muir to be more adversarial, but they said that they wanted him to, quote, prosecute the president. That's where you're overstepping the line from simply holding the president accountable to actually trying to get a negative reaction out of that interview. And that's when it becomes clear that CNN wants reporters to go beyond just reporting the facts to actually a form of activism. And it's funny to watch people go out and criticize David Muir, considering a lot of these people are the same ones who refused to cover the Tara Reade allegation for weeks, who had Joe Biden on their networks giving interviews and refused to ask him about it directly. It took over a month for him to have to answer for that on the record. In fact, President Trump actually responded to it before Joe Biden ever did. So this is really not the time for any of these people, including CNN, to be criticizing ABC's David Muir.
No, I agree. And something tells me that it has something to do with David Muir's very high ratings at the moment, which maybe prompted a little bit of the harsh response to him. I mean, 10 million viewers is 10 million viewers. That's a good number no matter where you leave it. But when you look at all of this as a big picture, do you think that the American people are starting to see through this a little bit? I mean, I've talked to people who say that in the past, journalism used to be objective. But now when I talk to those same people, they say, you know what, maybe it wasn't. Maybe we just didn't have the differing voices that would bring light to this. Do you think that is the case?
Certainly people started to see through this in 2016, and that's a large reason why a lot of the media's attacks on Donald Trump did not prevent him being elected president. And now we've seen the rise of more independent news outlets, more conservative news outlets that are able to provide a differing perspective. So people are starting to realize that a lot of the news that or so-called news they've been fed for the past couple of decades is really nothing more than just leftist propaganda.
No, I think that's what they're realizing the hard way. Because even, I mean, the Joe Biden thing is a perfect example. Everybody lived through the Kavanaugh hearings. Everybody is watching the news right now. And you don't have to be very heavily invested in politics or even the news to see the hypocrisy when it comes to this issue. Amber Athey, I really appreciate you coming on tonight. Thank you very much.